Number 30, the Minnesota Timberwolves' Sam Cassell. He was a solid player for the Timberwolves during the KG era, and they played well together. Didn't do much though other than make a deep playoff run once in 2004, which was mainly Garnett. However, he was the only other All-Star Garnett played with during his T-Wolves days, so I give him props for that. Other than that, nothing too special, other than his weird big balls dance. Number 29, the Miami Heat, Tim Hardaway. Tim Hardaway was a good second option for the Alonzo Mourning-led Miami Heat during the 90s. The crossover killer was a great scorer, combined with Mourning's great defense and offense, and those Heat teams really were good. But unfortunately, Michael Jordan and the Bulls stopped them from ever making the NBA Finals. Number 28, the Denver Nuggets, Fat Lever. Fat Lever was a very all-around point guard during his prime years, but the Nuggets weren't very relevant. But he also came very close to averaging a triple-double during his prime years, and the Nuggets were pretty good for a bit of time when Dan Issel, Alex English, and Kiki Vandeweghe were there. However, he's one of those guys who ultimately gets lost in the lore of NBA history, and he's mostly just remembered for his name being fat. Number 27, the Charlotte Hornets, Kemba Walker. Our first current player on the list, Kemba Walker was the best player on the Hornets throughout the 2010s, but the Hornets never did anything other than make the playoffs and often get out in the first round every year in the Eastern Conference. And the team really had no notoriety or significance during this time there, and they were really just the afterthoughts of the NBA. Kemba Walker was a very good player, but not good enough to carry a team to anything significant, and he kind of wasted the majority of his prime there, and hasn't quite been the same player since. However, he's kind of the face of the Hornets franchise, and is one of the few good players to stick around in Charlotte for more than a few seasons. Number 26, the Indiana Pacers, Freddie Lewis. I didn't initially know who Freddie Lewis was, but he was apparently a very talented player in the ABA. His teams never did much, but he himself played very well along with Mel Daniels, and made enough of a name for himself for 2K to put him in their game, so I'll put him on my list over Mark Jackson. Number 25, the Memphis Grizzlies, John Morant. While Morant is on pace to be much higher on this list at some point based on what he's shown us this far, he's only played 3 seasons, and while these 3 seasons have been great, winning Rookie of the Year, Most Improved Player, and even being in MVP talks this year, leading the Grizzlies to the second best record in the league, he hasn't done quite enough to put him any higher. But regardless, it looks like the Grizzlies with him on their team are on path to be one of the best teams in the West for the foreseeable future. Number 24, the Orlando Magic, Penny Hardaway. Penny Hardaway was a very talented point guard for the Magic, and everyone could clearly see that, but the Magic never did anything special while he was in his prime there after Shaq left, and unfortunately injuries derailed his career and he never reached his full potential. During his peak though, Penny was something special, a tall all-around point guard who was a great contemporary to Shaq, and then temporarily a great leader of the team, but like I said, injuries resulted in his peak being short-lived. Number 23, the Houston Rockets, Calvin Murphy. Calvin Murphy is a name you don't hear too much in NBA history, as he's a product of the 70s, but he was a very talented player with the Rockets that played with Moses Malone and even made NBA Finals in 1981, where they lost to the Larry Bird Celtics. Anyways, like I said, he's kind of somebody that you probably won't hear very much about, but I'm giving his respect right now, so there you go, Calvin. Number 22, the Washington Wizards, John Wall. John Wall is the first out of 6 number 1 picks on this list, and led the Wizards throughout the 2010s to being a solid team, and Wall even averaged a double-double one year in 2017, with 20 plus points and 10 assists. With his lightning-quick speed, Wall could torch defenses. But as we all know, the only team that was ever going to make it out of the East that decade was LeBron's, so the Wizards never did anything too significant, but he was probably the best point guard in the East during that time period. Number 21, the Philadelphia 76ers, Maurice Cheeks. Our first NBA champion on the list, Mo Cheeks was really a great player, believe it or not. He may not have been the best scorer, granted he was on a team with Moses Malone, Julius Erving, and even Charles Barkley at one point, but he could do about everything else. He was an undersized point guard, so he was good at other things, like setting up his teammates, and he was a great defender, averaging 2+ steals a game for most of his career, and was a key component for the 76ers teams of the 80s, and their famous fo run in 83. He obviously got outshined by playing with 3 top 20 players of all time, arguably, but Cheeks was a great player in his own right, and I'm making sure he gets the respect he deserves. Number 20, the Atlanta Hawks, Trae Young. Like Morant, Trae Young has far less NBA experience than the others you'll find on the list, but in the 4 seasons he's played, he's already established himself as a superstar. I mean, in his second season, he nearly averaged 30 a game as a 6'1" guard, with really no one else on the team to take attention off of him. And with his shot selection, Ice Trae, along with his other 2018 draft class contemporaries, who we'll get to in a moment, has proven you don't need all that much experience to still be extremely comfortable hanging with the rest of the stars of the league. By his third season, Young led the Hawks to the conference finals, and who knows what they'll do next with this talented young roster. This time around, he had a bad series against Miami as they were able to single him out due to his lack of help, but if he can get a second star around him, Young and the Hawks can be scary in the upcoming future. Number 19, the Toronto Raptors, Kyle Lowry. Our second NBA champion on the list, Kyle Lowry was an all-star level player during the DeRozan era, who would really do it all for the Raptors. But the Raptors could never get past the hump that was LeBron James, but what elevates him is what he did in 2019, when he won a championship with Kawhi Leonard, and then the year following was the best player on the squad and led the Raptors to the second seed in the East. Lowry may be the Raptors' greatest franchise player, as he stuck there for years through thick and thin, and was the leader of that squad for a good 9 years, which is far longer than most players have been willing to stick with the franchise. Respect to Lowry. Number 18, the Cleveland Cavaliers, Kyrie Irving. It was super hard to decide between Mark Price and Kyrie Irving for the spot on the list. Price was likely the best player on those 80s Cavaliers teams, but the East was competitive so they couldn't get to the finals. But he's really like Steve Nash before Steve Nash. Injuries cut his time there short, similar to Brad Daugherty though. Kyrie Irving had a different path to the Cavs than Price, as while Price was a second round pick traded to Cleveland, Irving was the number 1 pick, and once paired with LeBron James and Kevin Love, the Cavaliers were the most dominant team in the East for 3 years, where Irving made 3 straight finals and won one with a clutch shot in the closing minutes that won them the NBA championship in Game 7 of the NBA Finals against the 73-win Warriors. Irving was an effective scoring option on those Cavaliers teams that would have the ball in his hands as much as LeBron, and Irving deserves a lot of credit for making those Cavs teams great, even though LeBron is obviously phenomenal. I gave Kyrie the edge here since he was the one that won a championship. Number 17, the Chicago Bulls, Derrick Rose. D-Rose admittedly didn't have a long stretch of greatness, like the rest of these guys, but to be fair, I'm going by peaks, and D-Rose's peak with the Bulls was winning an MVP, so I figured this was a safe spot to put him. For 2 years, he was a young superstar and one of, if not the most explosive point guard we had ever seen, along with his 2008 contemporary Russell Westbrook, who we'll get to later. He was able to lead those Bulls teams to the best record in the conference 2 years straight, even though he was playing in the same conference as those Big 3 Heat teams, which is extremely impressive. He could have honestly been top 10 on this list had this terrible injury not have cut his prime short after he tore his ACL and was never quite the same player, and would get traded 4 seasons later. But when he was great, he was phenomenal, so I'm leaving him just outside the top 15. Number 16, the Dallas Mavericks, Luka Doncic. You could say Luka's a similar situation to John Trey, as he's only been in the league for 3.5 seasons, but admittedly, he's got some more substance than those two in my opinion. While the Mavericks have never been great during his time there, Doncic is clearly phenomenal and there's no getting around it. He's played just 4 full seasons and yet he's already made the All-NBA first team 3 times. It's been a while since we've seen a player come out so polished and so instantly dominant. It's honestly crazy to think he's only 22 and is already this unbelievably good. Since his second season, he's been in MVP talks, and the Luka magic just continues. This year, he led Dallas all the way to the conference finals, and I'm excited for what the future holds for him in the Mavs. Sorry for standing so much, but he's clearly the future of the league, and when it's all said and done, I'm sure he'll rise much higher on this list, but for now, I gotta put him just right outside the top 15. Number 15, the Los Angeles Clippers, Chris Paul. Chris Paul is an extremely talented point guard, but what he lacks is playoff pedigree, or even getting past the second round for that matter, up until the last few years. CP3 was the best player in NBA history to never make it past the second round in my opinion. That's what you get when you play in the West during the 2010s. While he did eventually get over the hump with Houston and Phoenix, we're talking about his Clippers days. In the prime of his career, Chris Paul wasted away in the wrong part of LA. Why couldn't he have gone to the Lakers? Why? Nonetheless, we got so many highlight plays out of Lob City that it's hard to complain. From the moment he got there, Chris Paul's playmaking ability combined with the super athleticism of Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan made a super trio. He was there for 6.5 years and made the All-Star game every year, made the playoffs every year, made the Clippers a contender every year, but couldn't make the Clipper curse go away any year. LAC was just riddled with injuries and there was nothing Paul could do about that. Healthy though, Lob City could go toe-to-toe with the Warriors and Spurs. They did actually, it just wasn't enough. I'm sorry Paul. But don't worry, you'll get another appearance on this list. Number 14, the Portland Trailblazers, Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard is similar to a lot of players on this list. A great player on a team that can never contend in the conference with the Warriors, Spurs, or Rockets. However, Lillard stands out among the rest on this list. His talent clearly shines through and he's proven he's up there with Stephen Curry in terms of shooting ability. He's extremely clutch and has used that ability to actually will his team into the second round when they really don't have any business being there. Examples: his 2015 buzzer beater against the Rockets.
He wins the series. It's Lillard. He got the shot off.
And his 2019 buzzer beater against the Thunder.
Lillard, long range three.
The man's got ice in his veins that I don't believe we've seen from a player since Kobe. He's easily the second best shooter in the league, which is extremely impressive in the modern NBA, and he's extremely effective. And you have to respect him for being such a franchise cornerstone, as he has spent all 9 years of his career with the Trailblazers and refuses to leave even after talented players like Nicholas Batum, LaMarcus Aldridge, and even now CJ McCollum have left him. He stuck with it, which shows just how much he means to Portland. The way it's looking, Dame Dollar might never win a championship, but he certainly won all of our respect. Number 13, the Milwaukee Bucks, Oscar Robertson. By the time Oscar Robertson made it to the Bucks, it could have already been too late. After he wasted away on the Cincinnati Royals, aka the Sacramento Kings, for so long succumbing to the Titans that were Chamberlain and Russell, Robertson ever winning a championship seemed hopeless. But he had just enough of his prime left to team up with the next great center, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, to create what was up to that point the most dominant team of all time, the 1971 Milwaukee Bucks. Though they would be topped just a year later by another guard center superstar duo, Jerry West and Wilt Chamberlain, on the 72 Lakers. The duo definitely had a dominant showing in the 71 season, and steamrolled the league to each get their first ring. It was almost too easy, but it was also too good, as Robertson finally got what he had longed for. Robertson slowed down after the season, but 1971 alone, and being responsible for getting the Bucks their first, and up until last year, only championship, is enough to propel him to the spot. Oscar and Kareem made another finals run in 1974 where they lost to the Boston Celtics, but nonetheless, Robertson made 2 finals during the end of his career in a very short period of time. Very impressive. Gone may have been the days of averaging a triple-double, but the Big O had still been the same player he had always been, just a veteran now, and he got to retire with a ring on his finger. Number 12, the San Antonio Spurs, Tony Parker. Speaking of rings on his finger, how about Tony Parker with 4? Yeah, he may not be the first person you think of when you think of championships, but Parker's had quite a few. A cornerstone during the Spurs dynasty, and a valuable second scoring option to Tim Duncan, or sometimes even first scoring option. Tony Parker is a big reason why the Spurs dynasty is the Spurs dynasty. He took some of the load off of Duncan, which was important, and could prove that when he wanted to, he could be the main scorer, such as in the 2007 finals when the Spurs crushed LeBron James and his Cavaliers in a sweep, with Tony Parker absolutely popping off and winning finals MVP. The longevity of Parker is also very admirable. He stuck with the Spurs for 17 years, through glory and heartbreak, and it's important to weigh how much he means to San Antonio. Tony Parker may have never gotten to be the best player on his team like the rest of the players, but that's not what the Spurs are about, nor is it what Parker is about. Everyone on that team was selfless and willing to do whatever it takes to win. Tony Parker played his very efficient combo guard role to perfection. Him and Duncan formed one of the greatest duos in NBA history, and it proved to be more than effective. Number 11, the New Orleans Pelicans / New Orleans Hornets, Chris Paul. I said he'd have another appearance on this list. New Orleans Paul also wasn't able to get past the hump of the second round, but this was truly prime CP3, at his youngest and quickest, and at his best. He was able to lead some good but not great Hornets teams to very good records, and from the moment he came to the league, people really knew he was special. After winning Rookie of the Year easily in 2006, just 2 seasons later, he came just second in MVP voting, only behind Kobe Bryant, when Paul had the best season of his career and led the Hornets to the 2nd seed. Many believe he should have won that MVP, but regardless, we can all agree it was his best season. From his play during his 6.5 seasons with New Orleans, many believe by the time it was all said and done, Paul could perhaps become the greatest point guard ever. While he's no longer in that discussion, this was quite the impressive start to a very impressive career. Number 10, the New York Knicks, Walt Frazier. Many people probably don't find Frazier to be as impressive or exciting of a player as others I've mentioned so far, unless you want to talk about his fashion. They call him Clyde for a reason. But Frazier is a product of the 70s, a forgotten time period in basketball history for everyone not named Kareem or Julius. But Frazier, along with Willis Reed, was the leader of those championship Knicks teams, which is honestly a sentence that sounds weird. But Frazier and Reed led one of the most talented teams of the 70s to 2 championships. But just because they were talented doesn't mean it was easy, and Frazier didn't do the dirty work as the team's best defender, playmaker, and arguably scorer. While Reed gets his cool moments of his broken foot and all when he scored 4 points and won 2 Finals MVPs, Frazier was an extremely talented player who I believe was the real reason those Knicks teams won championships, with some actual outstanding performances where he averaged like 30 and 10, rather than scoring 2 baskets in the opening minutes of a game. This going to show how Frazier was an incredibly gifted defender and playmaker. In all facets, Frazier really just was what New York needed, and was a real man responsible for their dynasty in my opinion, as the floor general of New York. Number 9, the Oklahoma City Thunder, Russell Westbrook. Like for the Cavs, this was a close conflict between past and present. This time it was trying to pick Russ or Peyton. Gary Payton was a phenomenal player for the Sonics and won a DPOY and led them to the finals. But overall, I just thought, why not 0? Okay, I'm sorry. I just felt like Westbrook was just a little bit better. Speaking of being great overall, how about Russ averaging a triple-double for 3 straight seasons? Westbrook, while with Kevin Durant, already established himself as a superstar level player, and the two certainly experienced much success together, making the conference finals twice and the NBA finals once, losing to LeBron and the Heat. But once Durant left, while it was clear KD was about to be thriving in Golden State, people didn't know how Westbrook and the Thunder were going to hold up. But he silenced the doubters pretty quickly by having one of the most, at least statistically, impressive seasons of all time, averaging a 30-point triple-double, a feat no one thought could ever be done again. And then of course he went out and did it again 2 seasons straight, despite playing with another superstar in Paul George. The amount of hustle and drive one must have to average a triple-double is insane. But of course the insane hustle and drive is Russell Westbrook, and has been his whole career. As I talked about with Rose, Westbrook also may be the most explosive athletic guard in NBA history. And during his years with the Thunder, he certainly used this to his advantage. But he proved to be a very talented playmaker as well, as he could harness his athleticism to create gravity that would open up shots for other players. We really hadn't seen a guard like this before, and while he may not have been the best shooter or made the best decisions at times, there's no denying that Westbrook was a cornerstone for Oklahoma City and gave 200% every night for them, and definitely got some results. Number 8, the Brooklyn/New Jersey Nets, Jason Kidd. Jason Kidd gave the Nets one of the more impressive transformations in NBA history, as in just his first season when he arrived there, he led that mediocre Nets team to the NBA Finals, and proceeded to do it again the next year, where he pushed it to 6 games with the Spurs. That just goes to show the kind of impact Kidd has. Jason Kidd was great for multiple teams during his career, like the Mavericks, the Suns, but he really hit his stride in New Jersey, and made the Nets the best they had ever been, leading them to 2 straight finals appearances, when they had really no right to be there. But with what he had to work with, he really did it all, averaging 15 points, 7 rebounds, and 11 assists, and 2 steals a game. He could score, he was a terrific playmaker and shot creator for his teammates, and somehow led the Nets back to relevancy. He also made a terrific pairing with the ultra-athletic Vince Carter and Richard Jefferson, and while they never really did much of note, it was still fun to watch. Kidd is one of the most talented point guards of all time, and he really shined through during his time with the Nets. Number 7, the Boston Celtics, Bob Cousy. Assuming you've heard of him, we all know Bob Cousy was fairly ahead of his time with the things he was able to do on the court. He basically brought street ball to basketball with some of his unbelievable plays and flashy passes. Of course, we know his dribbling wasn't exactly all that flashy, but who cares? Not only was he exciting to watch with his unique play style, but it translated to wins. We know Cousy was an integral part of that Celtics dynasty with Russell, with him being the main playmaker for their half-court offense when they weren't scoring off of fast breaks from Bill Russell's outlet passes, and that translated to 6 championships for the Hall of Famer. I'd like to think Russell and Cousy elevated each other. In Russell's first year with Boston, Cousy won the MVP and led the Celtics to their first NBA championship. Did you know that? We tend to try to forget about people who played back then, but it's evident Cousy was a legend during his day, and he always will be, so give him some respect. Number 6, the Phoenix Suns, Steve Nash. Earlier with Jason Kidd, I talked about instantly transforming a team the moment he got there, and Nash did exactly that when he got to the Suns. Well, the second time around anyway. He didn't really do much during his rookie season there. But in 2005, when Nash came back to Phoenix a more polished player, he really took control of the revolutionary 7 seconds or less offense and led to domination. Those mid-2000s Suns were one of the best offensive teams ever, and it ran through Nash, who won back-to-back MVPs in 2005 and 2006, where he led the Suns to being the best team in the league. We had really never seen anything like it. It was all Tier 3, and the ultra-efficient Steve Nash was really the perfect guy to lead it out, as he was a terrific shooter, and had the incredible playmaking ability to be able to create shots for others easy, and their offensive attack was definitely hard to stop thanks to Snap Nash's generational passing talent. Of course we do know there were liabilities on defense, most definitely Nash himself, and that's probably the main thing that held them back from ever winning a championship. But Nash had the offensive side of the game down, and was ultra impressive during his days with the Suns, giving them just the spark they needed to start winning. Of course it shows, as after he left the Suns throughout the 2010s were pretty much garbage, but while he was there, they were always one of the best teams in the league. Number 5, the Detroit Pistons, Isaiah Thomas. We know Nash was a one-way player, but Thomas on the other hand could really do it all. A maestro on both ends of the court. He wasn't super efficient like Nash or Stockton, but he could do whatever he needed to win games for the Pistons. There's a reason they got that moniker of the bad boy Pistons. They were kind of a win at all costs, but it worked, and Thomas could influence the game in a lot of ways, even if his shot wasn't always falling. Opponents definitely didn't like the way he played at times, shown by the fact he wasn't on the '92 Dream Team. But hey, he's able to say he was able to win championships in the era with Bird, Celtics, Magic's, Lakers, and even those early Jordan Bulls teams. Thomas was really the ultimate point guard for that time period. He was a great scorer. He once scored 25 points in a quarter, despite having badly sprained his ankle. He was also a terrific playmaker, averaging 10 plus assists 4 times during his 13-year career, including leading the league once with 14. He was also a phenomenal defender, as was everyone on those Pistons teams, but Thomas averaged 2 steals a game for his career. IT was just about everything a team from the 80s could ask for from their floor general and leader off the court. He really is the face of the Pistons and gave them their most glorious days in the franchise's history. Number 4, the Utah Jazz, John Stockton. Speaking of being able to do it all, that was Stockton. Stockton, other than in scoring, was like Isaiah Thomas, but enhanced in a lot of ways. Despite not scoring at a high volume, Stockton was pretty efficient. He was a great 3-point shooter for the time period, so that opened up some great opportunities for him in pick and rolls with his terrific partner in crime, Karl Malone. As of course we know, if the shot wasn't there, Stockton was a phenomenal playmaker. He's the all-time leader in assists. Speaking of all-time leading, he's also the all-time leader in steals. On paper, the stuff Stockton was able to do is obviously outstanding. In the 2 main categories point guards are supposed to do well in, Stockton leads in it. He was practically the perfect point guard, you would think, and you'd basically be right. His game was a bit impractical at times, particularly for the other team, with his ability to draw charges and play dirty at times, but Stockton would do whatever it takes to win. But when he did not. By the tail end of their primes, Stockton and Malone made 2 back-to-back finals against the Jordan Bulls. Now you could say, but Kenley, they're the Jordan Bulls, so it's not really fair to hold it against them too much. But I would reply that even throughout the decade, my friend, the Jazz often underperformed and didn't do much throughout their primes. And I do hold that against Stockton and Malone. While they could be clutch, Stockton in particular, for example hitting a game winner to send the Jazz to the finals, they also could choke. But I won't let that take away too much. It's clear at the end of the day to anyone that Stockton was a phenomenal point guard, and I think putting him just outside the top 3 here is probably fair. Number 3, the Sacramento Kings, or Cincinnati Royals, Oscar Robertson. Speaking of not winning a lot, but yet being terrific, yeah, I know these segues are starting to get a little forced. We have the Big O. Robertson happened to play not only in an era with those Russell Celtics teams, but also in the same conference. And don't forget Wilt too. So as you could imagine, Robertson does not have a million finals under his belt, like you'd find with a Jerry West or Elgin Baylor. But that doesn't take away from the fact that he was still definitely the same level of player as West and Baylor, if not better. Like others I've mentioned, he could really do it all, and he's got the stats to prove it. And I'm sure you know Oscar was the first player in NBA history to average a triple-double for a season, until the aforementioned Russell Westbrook broke it 55 years later. But that really just goes to show how special Robertson was. While he only averaged a triple-double once, he got pretty darn close a few other times during his time with the Royals. He was phenomenal. Other than Wes Unseld at the tail end of it, Robertson was the only player during the entire 60s not named Bill or Wilt to win MVP. And that was back when players were voting, so they saw how special he was too. He may not have the same finals and championships resume as others on this list, but he very well could be the most all-around talented on this list. Of course, when you can mix unbelievable talent with winning, well, you get something like... Number 2, the Golden State Warriors, Stephen Curry. Insane. Unbelievable. Limitless. All words that come to mind when you think of the Fast and Furious saga. Oh, and also Stephen Curry. Yeah, hands down the greatest shooter we've ever seen. Do you really need me to explain Curry's greatness to you? For one, he's the all-time leader in three-pointers made, and he did it in 6.5 less seasons than number 2. Second, he's the indisputable face of the most recent dynasty in basketball that has been Golden State since 2015. Third, he simply showcased the ability to do things that have never been done before, and revolutionized basketball as we know it forever. All that in an 8-year span? Crazy, right? Well, that's Steph Curry. We have never seen anyone like Stephen Curry, and while we will continue to see a lot of copycats, there simply will never be another. Steph Curry's limitless range is video game-like, except the stuff he does in real life, you can't even duplicate in a video game. Believe me, I've tried. In an 8-year span, Curry leads the Warriors to 4 championships and 6 finals appearances. He has had postseason success that rivals Magic and the Lakers of the 80s, which is a very difficult task. Of course, unlike Magic, for a long time Steph was missing a finals MVP in those championships, but he's got that now too. So I don't know, when it's all said and done, Curry might take his spot on this list. For now, I have to keep him at 2 though, as he's got 1 less ring, 1 less MVP, and less finals MVPs. But regardless, in the span of 8 years of his 13-year career, Curry has easily established himself as one of the all-time greats. Number 1, the Los Angeles Lakers, Magic Johnson. At our ever so predictable number 1 spot, we have Magic Johnson, the grinning face of the highly decorated Lakers franchise during the 80s. We recently talked about the impressiveness of the Warriors franchise with 6 finals in 8 years, but Magic and the Lakers did it first with their 7 finals in 9 years, not to mention 5 championships, so just a bit better. For now, who knows what the Warriors will do next year, but Magic edges out Curry as the greatest point guard of all time for me right now. As I said, some of the things Steph Curry is doing right now, Magic did first. Obviously not with the generational shooting ability, but revolutionizing basketball to some extent, and taking the game by storm, and making it never the same again. Before Magic, there had definitely never been a 6'9" point guard before, and the fact he was so unbelievably good at playing the position made him even more unbelievable. Pair him up with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you have a dynasty. The fact that the Lakers were blessed with so much talent blows my mind. Yes, admittedly those Lakers teams were top heavy, but take nothing away from Magic. Those teams don't work without him, proven by how much those teams were before he got there and after he left. Magic Johnson was Showtime, and during Johnson's career, Showtime dominated the NBA, kicked the league into the mainstream, and it was never the same again. In my book, Magic is the greatest point guard of all time.